So are you standing?
This time we'll get started. I see that Commissioner Parker will be absent this evening. Is there anyone here for an invocation?
Let's bow together. Our Father, we thank you for your goodness and your kindness. Lord, all around us today are the reminders that you are a good God, that you are a kind and benevolent God, a God who loves your creation, a God who loves those men and women that you've created. Father, tonight we come together to pray for this city commission. Your word tells us that not only prayers but thanksgivings should be made for all those in high positions. And so, Father, tonight we pray for them that you would give them wisdom as they journey through this evening, through their agenda. Father, we pray that you would give them insight. We pray that they would make decisions with justice and equity, and yet with compassion. And Father, secondly, we are thankful for them. We give you thanksgiving. Father, we thank you for how you have given them the opportunity, both the privilege and responsibility of leading in this town. And Father, may we, as your word says, pray for them, intercede for them, give thanksgiving for them, so that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way, because this is good and it's pleasing in the sight of God our Savior. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. There are no additions or corrections to the agenda.
Get started with the approval of minutes.
I'll move to approve the minutes of the January 18th, 2017 meeting.
I'll
Second. Oh, go ahead, Christie.
Second?
It's been moved by Commissioner Pound, seconded by Commissioner Hash, that we approve the minutes of the January 18th, 2017 meeting. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Hearing none, motion passes. Moving on to financial matters, appropriation ordinance number 2.
I move to approve appropriation ordinance number 2.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Hash, seconded by Commissioner Sacco to approve appropriation ordinance number 2. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes. At this time, we'd like to open up the meeting for any public comments. This will be the time that anyone in the audience would like to address the commissioner, the audience. Seeing none. Going once, going twice. At this time, we will close public comments, move on to appointments, the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Board of Zoning Appeals. Thanks,
Good.
Mr. Pounds. Cameron Thurmer and Tammy Britt are both expressing interest to serve on the Board of Zoning Appeals, so we recommend you appoint them.
I'll make a motion, we do that before they say no.
Second.
Second, yes.
We're actually pretty excited.
That's
Good.
good. That's fantastic.
It's been moved by Commissioner Sacco, seconded by Commissioner Pounds to appoint Tammy Britt and Cameron Thurner to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Seeing none, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. This time moving on to old business, the KDHE plan approval for wastewater treatment plant.
The material in your packet indicates that the KDHE has approved our plans. I asked Sarah Unruh, the engineer who's in charge of the project, to come up here this evening, and she's with us, and talk to you for a few minutes, since you've heard about this from me, but I thought before we start spending all this money, you might really want to hear the engineer tell us what we're doing.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. How are you?
Good.
Okay, so as Larry indicated, there's a memo in your packet that kind of summarizes what, where we're at and what we're doing. Just to kind of refresh your memory, we did do a study back in August of 2015, and the purpose of that study was to kind of look at what was going on at the wastewater treatment plant, see if there were things that needed to be improved now, things that needed to be improved later, to kind of develop a short-term and long-term plan to address issues. And what came out of that was a two-phased approach to do improvements at the wastewater plant. The first phase was intended to address kind of some immediate needs and things that needed to be taken care of sooner than later. And the second phase is intended to deal with some process upgrades, electrical controls, those kinds of things that aren't immediate needs, but are things that should be taken care of to increase efficiency in the future. And so where we're at is with the design of our phase 1 improvements. And we designed all those improvements, and we received approval from the Kansas Department of Health and Environment to move forward with those. We submitted those, got a few comments back, and addressed them. And so now we have our official approval letter to construct, which means that the next step in the process will be to actually let that project out for bids and solicit bids from qualifying contractors. So as a summary of what was included in phase 1, we have the replacement of equipment at the south clarifier. There are 2 clarifiers at the plant that are in operation. The equipment in the north one has already been replaced, so we're replacing the equipment in the south clarifier. We're also putting in new grit removal equipment. The existing equipment is actually broken and no longer in operation, and so this is putting a new system in to replace that. We're also replacing the guide rails on the aeration system. In the aeration basin, there are grids on the bottom of the basin that have the diffusers that let the air up through, and there are guide rails that those rails sit on. Well, they're currently made of, they're currently galvanized, and so they don't stand up in wastewater very well, so they're corroding. And so this project will replace those with new guide rails that are made of stainless steel, which is much more adept to the conditions in a wastewater plant. We're also going to install sound enclosures over the blowers. The blowers that push air into the aeration system there in that basin are exceedingly loud. And so we're going to be putting enclosures over that so that it's better for operators to be out there and be able to communicate, and just better for their safety. We're also putting in a new return activated sludge pump station. This is a pump station that returns part of the flow back to the front of the facility to keep the bugs going and the process moving, and then also waste some of the wastewater off to the digesters and the solids process. And so we're putting in a new pumping station to replace that system. There's been some issues with pipes backing up during higher flows, so we're correcting those issues with this new pump station. And then finally, a new sludge handling process. Right now, the facility hauls liquid for the sludge, and we're going to be doing a process there where that will actually dry it up, and it basically comes out with a nice dry cake that can be land applied much easier. So again, we received KDHE approval, so our next step in the process will be to let this out for public bid. What our process is that we notify specific contractors that are qualified to do this work that we've worked with in previous projects, and let them know. It also goes out on our website as well, and a few others, but it'll be out there for public bid. We typically will advertise for a 30-day period to give contractors enough time to look at that and give us good information, and then those bids will be publicly open and awarded after that.
Once it starts, what's the timeline for phase 1 completion?
I was opening this up so I could look at what our last deal was, but I believe we had estimated about a year or so for construction. A lot of that is getting the lead time just to manufacture a lot of the equipment. Guide rails and stuff like that isn't that big of a deal, but the newer, the bigger equipment pieces take a while to manufacture. And then simply working within an existing plant, things take just a little bit longer than they would if we were on a green open field. So about a year of time. So at this point, if we intend to advertise once we have your approval, So that would put us accepting bids in March, sometime in March probably. And so usually takes about a month or so to get all the contracts back and forth between the city and the contractor after that. So I would anticipate starting probably in May, sometime in May, and be about a year worth of construction time after that.
And then I assume that why the process is being done for phase one, the completion, that won't disrupt any of the service to the city.
No, the way that we write everything on the plans, the contractor is required to submit to us a construction sequence. So he's telling us how he wants to do all of these things, and the requirement is that service cannot be interrupted to the plant. The plant has to be maintained, full operation during the entire time. There might be a few times where we have to shut down for brief windows, certain things to be able to make tie-ins and things like that, but all of that will be coordinated with city staff so there's no interruption to service. Mhm.
As I remember it, phase one was sort of, as much as anything can be, relatively fixed in its scope. And there's a lot more variability with phase two.
There was at the time we first started talking about it, yes. When we did the initial report, the facility had started making some operational changes to try and deal with nutrient removal to get those nutrient levels down, particularly phosphorus. And the staff has worked really, really hard and done an amazing job. And they've been able to get those levels down to where you'd be able to meet, a new permit limit when it comes out. So initially when we did our first few studies, we were looking at maybe making some pretty big changes to that process. But at this point in time, we don't see that as being as big of a need. Now, we will still have to go to KDHE and get their approval to not have to do anything. But the staff has been working really hard and has been doing some great things out there. So I don't think it's going to be as big of a project at this point as we initially thought it would have to be. Now, we're talking about still obviously the electrical system needing to be replaced, electrical gear, and then being able to put a control system in so things can operate much more automatically, which increases efficiency and those kinds of things. More control over your processes so you can fine tune it even more than they already have with their limited instrumentation. So that's what will be the focus of phase two, and then there'll be some other things that we need to do. Like for instance, putting some new variable frequency drives on some other pumps that are in the system to help them operate more efficiently, and some other things like that.
I would imagine that there'd be any idea of ballpark what we're looking at. I mean, at that point, it seemed like the first phase was going to be around 2.5.
Correct.
Looks like that's pretty much where we are, but the second phase looked like it could be anywhere from 1 to 4, if I remember right, 1 to 3 million.
I don't know yet. I think that once we get this thing going, our next step would be to go back and look at that and refine what, like you just said, that was a pretty broad scope at that point when we were first looking at it, kind of refine down what we really need to do now, have that conversation with KDHE, and then once we have that and know what direction we need to head with, from their perspective, then we can definitely narrow that down and make it give you a good ballpark number for that.
But it does sound, because what the staff has done, that number will be cut drastically.
I think so. I can't promise you. Like I said, KDHE is going to kind of dictate to us a little bit, what needs to be done. But the work that the staff has done has been a great improvement. So. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
If you have no other questions, I don't know if this is on your list of proceedings, but entertain a motion authorizing DEC to proceed with letting the project begin soliciting bids.
Well, I'll make a motion for that.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Sacco, seconded by Commissioner Pounds to authorize PEC to open or to solicit bids. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Hearing none, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work this summer.
Thanks, Sarah.
Moving on to Resolution 2017-2052, wastewater treatment plant financing.
This is the other part of the project, and since several of you have not been through a bond issue proceeding with the city, I asked our bond counsel, Kevin Cowan, the gentleman sitting behind me, to present this resolution, which he drew, and explain to you a little bit about how this process all works.
Good evening.
Good evening.
As Larry said, I'm Kevin Cowan. I'm with the law firm of Gilmore Bell out of Wichita, and we serve as the city's bond counsel, which means sort of the city attorney, but in a very specialized matter, which is public finance. The resolution you have before you this evening is what we call the project authorization resolution, and it's sort of the kickoff of any bond financed project. And we thought the timing was good to do this now as you're just getting ready to go out for bids. This is step one, and there will be a couple of other steps. I'll go through the resolution briefly, and then we can talk about sort of what happens next. But if you've looked at the resolution, again, it's short. It describes your legal authority for undertaking the project and issuing bonds to finance the costs of the project, describes what the project is, and then and those are the whereas clauses. And then in the operative sections, we authorize the improvements as we define them to proceed. Section 2 is the project financing, where we reference the engineer's estimate on the project. And then the second sentence, we authorize bonds for the project. Section 3, reimbursement, there's a specialized provision of the tax code relating to tax exempt bonds that puts some limitations on what you can reimburse from bond proceeds. And so one of those requirements is at some point you have to make a declaration of official intent that you're going to finance a project with bonds. And once you do that, then you preserve the ability to reimburse anything you spend on that project from bond proceeds going forward. So if you adopt this resolution tonight, this project gets delayed 2 years, let's say. 2 years from now, you can still rely on this to say anything we spent in the 2 years, we can reimburse from bond proceeds. There were some problems in the past, and the IRS referred to these bond issues as pyramid bonds, where entities would spend cash and then 5 years later decide that they wish they still had the cash and interest rates were low. Why don't we go issue bonds now for that project that we paid for 5 years ago? And they were complaining that people were reimbursing costs for projects all the way back to the pyramids, which is like they call them pyramid bonds. So they put some time constraints on us. And so it's nice to get this in place and say, okay, and it's really 60 days back from this, you can reimburse any expenditures you've made. And then there's a significant exception even to that, which is preliminary expenditures for engineering, soil testing, all the things you have to spend money on before you really even know whether you have a project. You don't have this limitation. So if there are any concerns about that, we're going to be fine on those. And this will just cover sort of hard construction costs, land costs, and preserve that right to reimburse. The other thing I wanted to mention, you'll see in Section 2 we reference the engineer's estimate, $2,777,640, and then the bond amount's a little more than that. Just roughly speaking, we like to add 2% to whatever that construction estimate is for bond costs. I don't know that it'll be that much, but that's how we got to that number, and then just round it up to a $5,000 increment. So that's what this resolution does. I mentioned it's the first step. The second step would be at some point you'll have accepted, hopefully, a bid, a satisfactory bid, and from that you can size the bond issue. So maybe it's $2,777,000 right on the nose. Maybe it's something less than, hopefully it's less than that. And we'll use that to say, okay, if that's going to be the construction cost, add some of the finance costs, and come up with what the bond size will be, what the structure will be. That's part of step 2. With step 2, we would come back with what we call a sale resolution that says, you've authorized the bonds with this resolution. You're now proceeding with the project. You have an acceptable bid. Now it's time to sell the bonds. And that sale resolution would then say, we're going to sell the bonds on this date. City staff, bond counsel are authorized to do whatever is necessary to go sell the bonds in this manner. So that would be step 2, another short resolution that says, go sell the bonds now. And then step 3 would be the sale of the bonds, which would involve a bond ordinance, short ordinance, formal documents that we're issuing these bonds in this amount, and then a longer resolution that has all the bond details. It's like a 30-page document, interest rates, default provisions, all the things you want in sort of a borrowing document goes in that longer resolution. And then usually after you pass a bond ordinance and adopt a bond resolution, you would close within a couple of weeks after that and actually have the funds in the bank. So that's kind of the process looking forward. But again, this is kind of step one. I wanted to give you a flavor for what it is and why we're doing it tonight, and then what it will lead to in the future.
So when are the interest rates set, and how are they set?
At the sale. This issue would have to be a public sale. We have a requirement under our state law that if you're issuing what we call new money bonds for the first time for a new project, we're not refinancing anything, it's just a new project. To the extent the issue exceeds $2 million, you have a public sale, which means you advertise for bids. There are sort of some usual suspects in Kansas, Wichita, Kansas City that are investment banking firms that bid on these sorts of bonds. And then broader than that, sort of in the Midwest region, some other potential bidders. So you would advertise, and there's a statutory requirement that you advertise in your local newspaper and then the Kansas Register, kind of a bare bones advertisement, notice of sale. We're going to sell these bonds on such and such a date. But then bids are submitted. Typically, it would be early on the day of your meeting at which you would have the bond ordinance. And so usually 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. bids come in, get processed, determine what is the best bid, and the best bid is the lowest interest cost to you. And so process those. Will have circulated the bond documents before that, so a week in advance of your meeting or something, so it would be in your packet. But blanks for interest rates and who the purchaser is, we just won't know that till that day. So we have the sale early in the day, get all that information, scramble, try to get, name of the purchaser, the winning bidder, and all those interest rates into your documents so that that night we have all of that ready for you. So it's a bid process, short answer. And again, some statutory requirements about what has to be published, when you have to publish it. In this day and age, a lot of that information gets transmitted via email. We have an email distribution list that we can use and provide, and we'll send a full-blown notice of bond sale. It's a little longer, has more detail. And then if you haven't seen this document before, we call it an official statement, but it's essentially a prospectus for your bonds. So it's a little thicker document, would describe the bonds themselves, payment dates and who's the paying agent and what's the security for the bonds, all those sorts of things. And then a second part of it would have all of the financial, demographic information, economic information that a bidder might want to know about the city. So all those things will get drafted as part of that sort of step two, where we're saying we're now ready to go sell the bonds, go do the things necessary to get these sold. And that's, again, drafting those sale documents, including the official statement, distributing those to potential bidders, and then waiting for bids to come in on date of sale. But the bid form will list principal amounts that you would want to retire over a period of years, and then the blanks in the bid form are interest rates that they'll bid for each maturity. It's unusual to have a sale where somebody would say, if this is a 20-year issue and you have all these maturities, we're just going to bid one single interest rate, 3% or 4% on all of them. Usually it's lower rates early, higher rates later, because investment banking firms have different customers. Some want to invest short term. Usually those are financial institutions that are investing cash and they want to get it back quickly so they can use it again. So they'll be interested maybe in the short-term bonds. Those will have lower interest rates, less risk over a short period of time. And then the longer bonds, I think, are probably more traditional investors, maybe retirees or mutual funds that are interested in that sort of longer-term investment. And again, higher rates as you go out, just because the longer period of time means more risk of non-payment or default. Not that that would ever happen.
What would the City of Concordia's bond rating be? with our debt and ability to pay back?
I don't know, which is not a great answer. It's,
We have a Moody's rating, I don't know.
is that annually updated? I know we've,
That was from years ago.
We've heard from them recently, they haven't changed it.
it's, I'll say broadly, a healthy community like this, probably, and sometimes it's easier to think, I think of Standard & Poor's, which they're the A's and the A pluses and the triple A's. I would be shocked if you weren't somewhere in the A's or better. Most healthy communities in Kansas are. There was a time before the financial crisis when it was difficult to get a rating on this size of an issue or for this size of a community. If the rating agencies just weren't interested for whatever reason, and in coming out of the financial crisis, they became much more interested in rating all sorts of issues. And so it has become more prevalent to have this sort of issue rated, perhaps. And again, most healthy communities in Kansas, I can't speak for other places, it's just where we have experience, have a pretty good credit rating. I mean, A or better would be considered pretty good, and you have certainly above investment grade. And you have, I mentioned the institutional investors earlier, and I'm no expert on these things. It's, they're sort of off in the distance, but you'll have mutual funds and those institutional investors that have requirements. We can't buy any bond that's not rated, investment grade or better, B plus or better, A or better. And so that's the nice thing. If you do get a rating, that you'll open up the possibilities of bonds ending up with those places, which is just more potential interest and bidders on your bonds. So again, don't hold me to it, but I would be shocked if you weren't A or better.
We have located it, thank you, while you were saying that we were notified in January 20th this year that our credit rating remains A2.
A2.
We first got that in 2012.
That's pretty good.
Yes.
That should affect some interest rates. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and again, there was a time where you just wouldn't get a rating. And the financial crisis changed things, and part of it was on the rating agency side of things. They got in a little bit of trouble and made some statements, I think, where they felt like they needed to get involved in rating these sorts of issues. And then the demand side of things, investors coming out of that were saying, we'd like to have a rating on more things if possible. And so it has been worthwhile. We haven't really gotten far enough to talk about ratings and what that means, but this would be the size of deal, and if you already have a rating that's pretty good, that probably want to continue that.
What's the normal timeline then?
From start to finish?
Yep.
To get bonds issued? Oh, well, if you could move very quickly if you wanted to, but usually from this stage where we're going to authorize the bonds, it means we're plowing forward a little bit, we're going to take bids on the construction, probably 60, 90 days. I mean, it moves pretty briskly from start to finish. So if you're curious, as I'm standing here, and maybe it was mentioned earlier, in terms of when you expect construction bids back, but as I'm standing here, you certainly could, barring unforeseen circumstances, sell the bonds and close in April pretty easily, May even more easily. So
We'll want to kick it into gear as soon as we know the amount that we need to borrow in order to have the funds available when we start receiving requests for payment from contractors.
and once you adopt the sale resolution, which is the next step, then you have to publish a summary notice of bond sale. That publication has to be at least a week in advance of the sale. And it works out pretty well that you meet on Wednesdays as opposed to Mondays. Sometimes it's tough with Monday meetings that some cities have because the state's newspaper and perhaps the local newspaper now as well only publishes on Thursdays. So if you met on a Monday and you thought, well, we're going to have to publish this on a Thursday in the state newspaper at a minimum, you couldn't get it published until 2 Thursdays following. They have a week advance notice time. So if you met on a month, well, we'll apply it to you. You meet on a Wednesday, you could submit the summary notice, or we would submit it for you. The following Thursday, it would be the next Thursday, next day. It would be published a week later, and then you could not have your sale any earlier than 1 week after that publication. So it's probably not going to be you meet on a Wednesday and then your next meeting is 2 weeks later on a Wednesday. The sale won't happen that quickly. It's probably going to be the following one, which may not be 4 weeks, depending on when things fall. So it's probably going to be 3 or 4 weeks after we adopt the sale resolution that you could have the sale. And then, as I mentioned earlier, a couple of weeks after the sale, you could close. So, again, Larry referenced, once we know what those bids are, we'll work pretty quickly to get things processed, have you act on the sale resolution, and then it's probably going to be something like 6 weeks before you close.
So is the procedure on this is normally just one financial institute take the whole
Yes.
amount?
Yeah,
In other words,
that's a
you
really
couldn't
good
split it
question.
up.
And some of that is self-serving for the city. If you said, we're gonna have an auction, we'll take any bids on any maturities, whatever you like, you could have a situation where you don't get bids on all of the maturities. Then the other danger is if you're dealing with multiple bidders, if one of them didn't follow through at closing, then you'd have a problem. You wouldn't be able to close on the full amount of your financing. So that's one of the things we put in the notice of sale, that it's an all or nothing. If you're bidding, you're agreeing that you will buy all of these bonds, and then it's their responsibility to figure out where they sell them. And a lot of times, again, I'm not an expert, I know these things happen. A lot of times you'll have a bidder that if they're the winning bidder, the first call they may make would be to local banks. They may be customers of theirs. If they're an investment banking firm, they may sell bonds to a local bank. And so I know bidders, that makes their job a little easier if there's some local flavor and local interest. But typically, or the other thing that happens, local bank may see the city selling bonds. I wouldn't mind having a piece of those, not all of them, but maybe a piece. And then they may pick up the phone and call whatever investment banking firm they work with and say, hey, we're interested in some of this. If you want to bid on it, we'll work with you on some of these maturities. So yeah, that's a really good question. It's an all or nothing
See, I'm
proposition
wondering
just to
if you had
protect
some
you.
deferred ones that were lower from one guy, one institution, the other, you split it up.
No,
Which
I mean,
answered my question.
yeah.
Right, with the resolution at this time then?
Sure. Well, I'll move to approve Resolution 2017-2052.
Second. It's been moved by Commissioner Pound, seconded by Commissioner Lamberts, Mayor Lamberts, to approve Resolution 2017-2052 wastewater treatment plant financing resolution. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you, Mr. Count, for your
Thank you.
Kevin, do you
Information.
mind just retaining the podium? The next item on the agenda is, ask Kevin to come and talk about the technical side of that also.
So the next item on the agenda relates to the property tax exemption that's pending. And Larry and I had talked about this a little bit, and the hearing for this, as we'll discuss further in a minute, is scheduled for February 22nd, and it may have made more sense for me to be here on the 22nd, but I have a conflict. I told him that makes any sense, I can come talk and again, sort of give you a flavor for where this is going and maybe address some of your questions tonight before we even get to the hearing. So I know you all have talked about this prospect and this property tax exemption, and the process is relatively simple and I think straightforward in that an application is made to you for a property tax exemption, or to the city, and the city has certain requirements as to what that application should contain, and I think an application has been made, it has met all of those requirements, and so the next step is to set a hearing, and that's a statutory requirement. If you're considering a property tax exemption under our constitutional provision, you set a hearing, you have a hearing. At the time of the hearing, a cost-benefit analysis has to be available, and that's already available, which is great. And then those are sort of there are three prerequisites. You have to have the hearing, you have to have a cost-benefit analysis, and then you have to find that the business that's going to be located here meets one of the constitutional requirements. And one of those is that they manufacture articles of interstate commerce. And so that's what we're relying on here, or anticipated that you would rely on. So for tonight, again, it's fairly simple. An application has been made, and so the next step in the process is to set a hearing, which is required by statute. That hearing date would be February 22nd. If you set that hearing date, the city staff is also authorized to give notice of that hearing to the other taxing subdivisions, which is also a statutory requirement. So that's what you would do tonight. Then at the hearing, it's a public hearing. You would run it like any other hearing. Have your considerations, the cost-benefit analysis, and I think you're flipping through it there, prepared by Wichita State, and they do a lot of these, and that you're always looking for a positive cost-benefit ratio, and my reading of that, and I've looked through it, certainly city-county level, pretty positive in terms of the cost-benefit ratio. I always like to point out as well that measurement is just for the period of time that there would be an exemption. And I always think, and maybe I'm wrong, but you're probably looking longer term than that. You probably wouldn't be considering this if somebody said, well, we're going to be here for as long as we have a property tax abatement, and then we're going to leave. So it's more of a short-term property tax exemption, in the thought being, well, maybe you're here 30 or 40 years, and it's after the exemption's over that you really see a lot of the benefit. So again, if you have a positive ratio during the period of time where you have all of your costs in terms of the tax exemption, that's a pretty strong thing. And then again, you can think, well, after the exemption period's over, things will be even better in terms of what your benefits would be. So those are the sorts of things you think about, talk about in connection with the hearing. There will be a resolution that I would draft for action after the hearing, if that is your desire. And the resolution is required by statute. I don't know why the statute says you do this by resolution, and there are other things you do by ordinance, but by resolution you have to make a finding that this business, this operation is going to meet that statutory and constitutional requirement that they're going to be manufacturing articles of interstate commerce. And if so, that's one of the big prerequisites. The other thing we would have you do if this moves forward after the hearing is pass an ordinance. The ordinance actually grants the exemption and then would also authorize the execution of a tax incentives agreement, which is something else that I would draft between now and then, that just sort of spells out, this is the agreement. You're going to get this. You're going to be manufacturing articles of interstate commerce. Company, there's an annual renewal process. Company is responsible for initiating that. They have to work with the city to do that, but it's not the city's responsibility to call them every year to say, now's the time for renewal. So all those things are in the incentives agreement that would also get approved. So if the ordinance is passed after the hearing, then an application is prepared, which we would help with, and is submitted to the county appraiser. And if everything is in order, the county appraiser then sends that on to the Board of Tax Appeals. And again, if everything's in order, a short time thereafter, the Board of Tax Appeals would issue the order that grants the property tax exemption. And then, really after that, it's a matter of annual renewals. And again, the annual renewals would relate to not only the timing, but also checking in and, you know, you're still using this. They have to make representations. They're still using it for manufacturing articles of interstate commerce. If that changed, and they fell outside of what the Constitution allows in terms of business operations that can benefit from this, if it turned into an outlet mall, you know, then the exemption ends. And that's part of the renewal process, checking in and making sure all of those things are still true. So that's kind of the process.
And this is nothing that could be carried over to someone else
Correct.
without our permission.
Correct.
It'd have to be a whole new process, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It is granted on the property, but it relies upon the company and the use it's making of, and it's exclusive use. So that's the key. If they started using it for something else, if they decided to leave but lease it to somebody else and they were going to use it for, then yes, all of this ends, both statutorily, and we would include that in the tax incentive agreement as well.
Is there any situation in which it might be transferable?
Yeah, there's some process to it. I mean, if it was a different company, maybe it's even a related company, but they're going to use it still for manufacturing articles of interstate commerce, I think we could continue it, and it would involve some additional proceedings and really probably just amending and updating those things. Not sure I've ever been through that, but
But it would still be our approval.
yes.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's the important thing.
Yeah.
It could continue, but it would still
It's
involve
not automatic, it's
you.
not.
Yes, they can't just go do it and say, well, you know,
They can't make it part of the
we
sale.
don't have to involve you, city. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, in terms of actions, yeah, I had drafted sort of an excerpt of minutes where it just shows this discussion, and then a commissioner would move to call a public hearing at 5:30 PM or as soon thereafter as may be heard at City Hall in regard to the application of Concordia Technologies LLC for property tax exemption, and that the clerk be authorized and directed to publish notice of such hearing and provide written notice of such hearing to USD 333, the county, and the community college. I didn't reference them earlier. So again, if somebody moves to set that hearing date on the 22nd at 5:30, and then it will authorize the clerk and the city staff to give notice of it. And then
I'll make that
second.
motion.
It's been moved by Commissioner Sacco. Is there a second?
I second it.
Second by Commissioner Hash. It's been moved by Commissioner Sacco, second by Commissioner Hash to set the public hearing for February 22nd, 2017 in regard to the application of Concordia Technologies LLC for a property tax exemption. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You'll be
Appreciate your guidance.
seeing more documents from me, and then we'll see me again at some point in this process. So,
Look forward to it.
thanks.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the 6th Street Water Line Project.
Ken is here to announce the bids to you. I might just preface this briefly. As you're aware, these are the two projects that we made a point of setting aside money for at our last budget deliberation. The total cost is within the amount we set aside, hoping to do these projects with, and they were deliberately bid in three different projects. One is 6th Street water main replacement from Washington to Broadway, and the other is reconstruction of the water lines in 18th Street from Lincoln to whatever it is, State. And then the other is reconstruction of 18th Street. And on the street project itself, we asked for a bid for a concrete street or as an alternate for an asphalt street to see what, if any, difference there might be in price and to determine then based on that which one we would recommend. So that's all the subjects of discussion this evening.
Good evening. You have in your packets two recommendations, and they are just for the water line. We were asked not to make a recommendation on the 18th, but I can discuss it with you if you would like. The 6th Street water line project, which is the one block right in the middle of downtown, is the low bidder was APAC, Kansas, out of Salina, and they're actually their water line crews out of Hutchison. So they are the company that did the water line project from Lincoln to Republican on 11th Street for us. They're also the company that did the 6th Street project from Lincoln to Broadway for us last year. They're a very good company. I don't have any qualms about their work. Their base bid was very pleasing. We knew last year when they did the other block, they told us they would be considerably lower than anybody else because they were sitting on pipe on hand and didn't have to buy it. So that made quite a bit of difference in their cost versus the next one above them. So we didn't get quite that good of a bid for this one, but we got one very similar. We're a little less in footage for that block than we were for the other one. So we would recommend that you would contract with APAC to do the 6th Street water line project. Then the 18th Street water line project, which is from Lincoln to...
Maybe we should take these one at a time.
Oh,
You want
okay.
to act on that recommendation?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to accept the APAC for 220, 223.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Sacco, second by Commissioner Pounds, to move forward with 6th Street with APAC. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes.
Don was gonna do this tonight, but we've been passing around the crud in our office since the 1st of January. He has it now. So he's home ill, so I'm filling in for him. So the 18th Street project, which is the project where we're replacing the water line before we rebuild the street so that we don't have an issue of having to tear up a new street. And it goes from Lincoln, from right just west of Lincoln Street, all the way through State Street to connect. This project was even more of a surprise than the 6th Street project in that it's considerably lower than anticipated. That there were 5 bidders on this project. Every one of the bidders was lower than the engineer's estimate. The low bidder was Deep Creek Construction, and they're a small company out of Lincoln, Kansas. They have worked in Concordia on the 11th Street project, starting at Republican and going all the way out to the hospital. They did that project for the city. They used a non-directional bore equipment to bore underneath everybody's driveway out there since we were in the soil, and then they just potholed to make connections. Now in this case, we have a lot of connections. I don't know they'll try that. There's 22 different service meter pits, and so if you dig by a boring apparatus for 30 feet, then have to dig up and do another 30 feet, and then have to dig up, it's not very cost effective where you can trench that entire time. But there are 2 specific areas in the last block between Washington and State where they will be required to bore underneath a driveway that has retaining walls on both sides of it. Instead of trying to cut across and try to how to dig underneath the wall, they'll bore under and then we'll start again on the other side, so we don't have to worry about driveway failure and that type of thing. Their bid was $140,188. We spent some time talking to them after their bid, because we were concerned about how low it was. Their comment, more than anything else, is about 30,000 of their dollars is in mobilization. They have a very low mobilization bid, where a lot of the companies have fairly high mobilization bids. They don't think that they're going to have that kind of cost bringing their equipment in and setting up. That's great, if that's true. So I look back on the 11th Street project, that's how they got the 11th Street project, because their mobilization was lower than the next bidder. And they said they made a profit on that job. So I feel very comfortable accepting them. We have watched their work in other communities. They work a lot in Lincoln County and did a major water line project in the town of Lincoln just a year ago. And they usually do smaller communities where they don't have to bond a large bond cost. And so this is probably in the 60% of their bond. So, you know, they probably won't do a project over $350,000 because of the bonding costs. So it's a great opportunity for us to get a company in that's smaller, to help a small company do work, as well as get the work done before the street project. So we would recommend that you go ahead and contract with Deep Creek Construction for the 18th Street water line project. If I remember correct, they had a start date like March, a finish date like May. So they're anticipating getting in and getting clear out of everything done and out of the way, so we don't have to. Now, part of the savings on the 18th Street project is we're going to repair all the driveways with the street project. So he doesn't have all this concrete cost that goes into repairing driveways he has to go across, sidewalks he has to go across, streets he has to go across. Ron and Jeremy discussed this, and then instead of having them repair it and then tear it out, maybe 3 months later as part of the street project, that they'll put the drives back in as a rock drive for where their gap is, and then we'll replace it as part of the street project.
So that would address the concerns that citizens have brought where there's a big difference in the level? Okay,
And that probably saves about $35,000 to $40,000
okay,
in that cost.
yeah.
And a lot of that is a small company like this really doesn't like to do the concrete work if they don't have to. That's why they like to bore, because they're set up to put water line in, not to do repair work of a lot of street pavement. And so by getting that incorporated into the street project, it gave us a benefit for this. So if you take those two sums that we talked about and add them together, then you're back in there right in with everybody else's bid. So
In regards to the work that was done on 11th Street, performing well, any challenges?
No, it, that was how many years ago, 10?
206?
I think it was before I got here. So it's at least
207.
9.
I can't remember, we did the two projects 2 years apart. We did the first one from Lincoln to Republican, and then it was 2 years later we did the next one.
So then their timeline would fit in nicely.
Very
with the
nicely.
street. Yeah,
Of course, this is all dependent on weather. We're working in the soil,
sure.
and that's spring. So if it's a normal spring,
Who knows?
it'll be slower.
Yeah.
Now, the advantage of them being behind the curb with their work is the street project could theoretically start while they're still working. So
Not much stepping on toes or anything. They were able
it'll be
to-
a lot of people in one area. It could be managed, and we anticipated that. So
Sounds like a good group. I'd make a motion, we accept that.
I second it.
Creek Construction.
It's been moved by Commissioner Sacco, seconded by Commissioner Hash to award the 18th Street Water Line Replacement Project with a bid of $140,188 to Deep Creek Construction. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Hearing none, motion passes. Moving on to the 18th Street Project.
Now, how do you want me to address this? Okay. We had 5 bidders on the 18th Street project. It was a project with an alternate. It was bid as a concrete pavement project with an alternate as asphalt pavement. So you have the 2 options in there of total prices. You have a price for a total for concrete for those who bid concrete and those who also bid asphalt. So if you look at your proposal sheet, you'll see that, well, that we had 3. We had 4 bidders who bid the alternate and 1 who did not. He bid only concrete and not asphalt, and that would have been
Brian.
Bryant. Yeah, there's actually 7 bids, isn't there? Vopak. Okay. So if you look at this, the concrete bids versus all the concrete bids, you'll find that, I gotta get my tab sheet out here. We find that J&K Contracting out of Junction City is the lowest concrete bid. Of $560,170.65. And then there were 2 of them. Oh, yeah. There were 2 of them, 2 others that were in the 500,000, and then 1 that was over 600,000. 2 of them that were over 600,000. Then if you take the concrete out and have an asphalt bid, then you find that Hall Brothers becomes the low bidder for the asphalt bid of $517,249.45, with J&K being second in the asphalt bid at $539,000. So you have approximately, between the low bid of asphalt and the low bid of concrete, you have approximately $40,000 difference between the 2 bids with 2 different contractors. Hall Brothers is primarily a company that does only asphalt work. They do not do concrete work, where Bryant & Bryant only does concrete work and does not do asphalt work. So it makes it a little bit unusual in your bid tab when you walk through it. Every one of the companies there, Smoky Hill Incorporated has been in Concordia before doing work. Hall Brothers has been in Concordia doing work. J&K did the water and sewer project from Concordia out to the law enforcement center. They're the ones that installed the sewer and water project there. Since they were here in 2008, they have now opened up a branch of their firm into doing pavement as well. Now if they were to do the asphalt work, that would probably all be subbed out to an asphalt contractor, because they do not have asphalt equipment, so they would probably sub it to a subcontractor. But they do have the equipment to do concrete work. So. Nowak Construction has been in our community, and Vogue's Parga is the only one that has not been in our community, but they are probably do 3 or 4 projects a year in Salina. So they're in the area, so. So really what it comes down to in here is deciding on which project you want to go forward, whether it's an asphalt project or a concrete project.
On that subject, staff's recommendation that we, since we can do so and still stay within our budget, build a concrete street instead of an asphalt street. Ron may want to address that with you a little bit, and also I know that there are representatives of Abrams Ready Mix here this evening, and I take it they would be the concrete supplier, so Mr. Abrams may want to address you also. And I'll just note for the record that you have received some information from an asphalt vendor about the virtues of their product also.
And am I mistaken, is there someone also from Hall Brothers here? I saw a label on a jacket and it almost looked like Hall Brothers.
The concrete pavement is 8 inches of concrete pavement. The asphalt is 6 inches asphalt with base under it.
Base being crushed
Rock.
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 Well, I'm in favor of concrete.
Yeah, I am too.
I have a question about that. It's probably my own ignorance, but the information that we got from Abrams, this, I think it was, didn't you send us information? That talked about the sealing and the chemical application. Do we do that after, when we get streets that are concrete, like we've got several concrete streets in town, do we do the upkeep with the sealing and that kind of thing?
Not that I'm aware of.
No. I've never sealed a street except for putting joint sealant in on the
Okay.
joints. That's it. And this project, there's no joint sealant in it, but we thought later on we could come out and do it, the city crews themselves and do it. Just, all that is resawing the joints and putting the tar mix in it.
Okay.
So,
Maybe I'm
Yeah,
gonna make
probably.
that clear, the ceiling and crack joint is the asphalt.
Yeah, you seal the asphalt.
That's the expensive part of asphalt.
Okay.
You received information, surprisingly, the information provided by the concrete folks was in favor of concrete. The information provided by the asphalt folks was surprisingly in favor of the asphalt. It's surprising, as it might be. I think, when I first hear this, my thought is that concrete's stronger, it's gonna last better, it's gonna have better wear and tear. But I also know that a hole or a patch needed in asphalt would be easier than patching concrete. And so when I was talking with the individual about the asphalt project, what my comment was to them is, I want to do what's going to give us the best value for the dollar over the longest run. And that if it means paying more now and we're going to get a better yield, but sort of like, and I think that part of the literature was calling into question the longevity of concrete, which, again, borrowing Christie's phrase, there's a reason I'm a social worker and not, and road crews. So it seems somewhat of a philosophical debate, but what other information do you have that could help kind of clarify that asphalt's going to be cheaper, it's going to be easier to redo, but it's not going to wear as well as concrete, which will then be more expensive to replace? What's going to give us the best value over the long run?
that's tough. I mean, asphalt, naturally, you can come back and repair. It's gonna be easier to repair. Concrete isn't. I can tell you, back in 2003 and 2004, the city crews themselves put a 8-inch concrete surface down on First Street. And if you go down there and look at it today, this looks brand new almost still. And we're 12 years out. And I've got cracking down there, but it's in corners where it's hard to control. Wherever we put control joints, it stayed there. I mean, we sealed it. I think it still looks pretty good myself. And I know what the asphalt guy is gonna say, out here on the highway, they went over concrete with asphalt, yes. Number one, they was doing a test on a base rock out there, a drainable base rock,
And I think it's failed, and that's why the concrete's failing, because the base underneath of it.
Wash
Well, I don't know if it washed out, but it gets moisture there, and it's, soft, and it lets it settle and stuff, but I know when I talked to Leland about it a lot, that was a big mistake. And I see it here in town, if you go through the College Drive intersection out there and heading out of town, it's real rough. It's
Yeah.
starting to work it. And you're talking about something too, a highway versus an in-town street, the traffic difference. You know, heavier trucks out there versus lighter cars. And even that, down on First Street, we got truck traffic down there coming off the highway. Charbonneau's use it all the time, and it's held up real good for us.
First Street is a concrete street we did plan in
2003 and 2004.
It's holding up real well.
Yes. That's what I told them earlier, so.
I know my experience with the ethanol plants, the asphalt just doesn't hold up, especially when it's really hot.
Yeah,
And when you get really hot and you get that on there, you get the ruts, the tires, especially on turning. And concrete, I mean, that's the only way I would go.
yeah. Also, like on asphalt too, there's no control joints in it. It's gonna crack wherever it wants to. And we've got newer streets, you know, like 18th Street, and if you drive down where it starts to crack, they start divot in like this. It's hard to repair without a mill and overlay and patching all that stuff too. For a little extra money, concrete would probably be what I'd recommend going. You're gonna have less maintenance over the next 15 to 20 years. Asphalt, you're gonna start doing maintenance in 5 years, you're gonna start sealing it and stuff.
Part of this
Cracking.
also is the new water line is not going to be under the street, it's going to be up in the parking, so we won't have occasion the main breaks to be sliding up the street. We have to have a lateral break.
Right. And most of them, if they leak, they're gonna run out and follow them out to the edge, and Jeremy ain't gonna tear up the street, he's gonna pull a new line underneath of it. So, is there anything else I can answer?
Well, I moved,
Go ahead. 'cause I'll
I
have
moved to
discussion
award
on it.
the 18th Street Street Improvement Project with a bid of $560,170.65 to J&K Contracting, which is the low bidder for the concrete.
All second.
Moved by Commissioner Hash, seconded by Commissioner Sacco to award the 18th Street Improvement Project with a bid of $560,170.65 to J&K Contracting. Any further discussion? Well,
Been waiting to ask this question. What are we gonna do with that gravel street, which is what, Broadway? Washington, okay, yeah, Washington Street, and keep that gravel from washing down, you know, in a new situation like it's done, you know, forever.
I don't know
Put
how
a
to,
big terrace right there, or a big bump, or whatever. I mean, we just gotta keep that gravel off that new street, you
yeah,
know?
that, all that water comes out of that alley and comes right down there and washes it all out. The only way to control it is to pave it.
There's a pavement, yeah.
Yeah.
Ken, we're starting with a new street. What can we do? What are you engineers? I mean, surely you can do something now, since we're gonna tear that street out and start all over, to keep that gravel from, I wish those homeowners would pave it right. And I wish the city at large could go in and say, hey, we're gonna pave it, and you folks that are benefiting are gonna pay for it. But we don't do things that way. So how are we gonna deal with that?
There's only 3 ways you can actually deal with it. One of them we are trying with this project. We're going around the corner farther with the radius, with pavement, to push the pavement farther up the street, so that it doesn't have a rock so close to the intersection. Hopefully that'll deter it enough to cause it to go into the yard instead of into the street. The other option you have is to go back to the alley and put pipes under the street, take the water across to the alley on the other side, which then will run into everybody's backyard.
Well, it's either do that or pay a bit to pave the.
Or you could pave it.
Dump
And
it
if
right.
you pave it, then you need to put curb and gutter in, because it's the curb and gutter that controls the water.
Right. But I sure hope that we don't, you know, let this opportunity go by to stop that gravel from washing down that, you know, 18th Street to the bottom, because it just doesn't flow anywhere, because it hits that bottom point, and that's where it just builds up.
And it's
Poor old
lower
Gene-
towards 18th than it is across the street towards the other side, so it turns the
Right.
corner and comes
What would it cost to pave it?
It's about,
It's a block.
300
One block?
300, right at 300 feet.
We just did an estimate for columns up there on Kansas Street. And
Oh,
for the
really?
city doing the work themselves and doing it. And that's something we could tackle where there's nobody living there, and it could take our time to do it.
We didn't have any interested takers on that one, though.
No, we never. And that's the problem with this one here.
None
you
of
know.
the houses face Washington, they all face
Yeah.
maybe
So-
17 or 18.
Maybe we're talking one block. I mean, it's a protect a
But-
bigger investment.
Yeah, you basically, you have their grading costs and the prep of the ground. Then if you're gonna do curb and gutter, somebody has to put curb and gutter in. Then you have the cost of your asphalt pavement. Now, in this case, maybe that's a good place to
that-
do like 4 inches of asphalt.
4 inches asphalt, and that stopped gravel from going down it.
And what we're talking about Broadway at
Washington,
Washington
from
between
18 to
seven-
7.
Yeah.
Washington from 18th to 17th. Okay.
Yeah, I know that there have been times when the landowner's gone out there and it looks like he's actually built up a berm in the road that these guys maintain out when they maintain the road, that causes it to turn and go across the street into the neighbor's yard across the street.
Yeah, I mean, even 4 inches of asphalt. I mean, it costs.
Yeah, anything to get from pavement to pavement without having loose material in between.
Exactly.
And you could probably just do a half a block there too.
Yep,
Yeah,
probably could.
that works. too.
Might even be able
Yeah.
to do a flume.
Yeah, keep it on the one side. and run
Keep it
down.
on one side and carry it all down in a flume to the street, maybe.
Could you gentlemen come up with a cost of doing something? It's
Yep.
inexpensive, but to keep the gravel from coming on our investment.
How far
Yeah.
back does the asphalt stop in the alley? It doesn't come clear out to the street, does it?
I think it's close.
So if
I
we
mean,
could turn it,
we could try and grab it right there and turn it and run it down one side of the street there.
flatten it out and let it just pour out on
Because
the,
that's what happens, it comes out onto that street and it washes all that rock out there. We can control it on the west side of the street there and run it out into the drain.
that'd be about 150 feet approximately.
Yeah, so if you put some 10-foot wide in there maybe to try to control it.
Yep.
So whatever the concrete is for 10 foot by 150 foot. It'd be something the city could go in there and do actually.
Yeah. And it'd be worth it.
You know,
If we're gonna
On
be-
the backside and just build it out on one side of the street.
If the whole point of paying more for concrete is to have it last us longer.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm not real excited to spend more money, but I want to do it, I'd rather do it right
Do it
than.
right, then all that investment gone.
Yep, we'll look at that.
Good, thank you.
I had a quick question, and maybe I just heard this right. J&K Contracting is the one that did the water and sewer line out to the, wasn't there some complications with running the water and sewer line out to the law enforcement center?
That was a gas line.
That was the gas,
Fair enough.
the gas
fair enough.
line.
The two are there in good shape and the gas line.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification. I just,
The sewer was in good shape.
okay.
Yeah.
Good.
well,
It's in good
The
shape
gas
again.
line pierced
J&K
it.
wasn't the name I associated with when I heard that.
B.
And this is, they've done 2 or 3 other street projects in Junction City and some of those new subdivisions that went into Junction City.
There's a motion to approve this. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Seeing none, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Managers report.
We had staff training Monday morning on the new GIS mapping program, and I found myself able to understand most of it, and was hearing back, the comments I was hearing indicated the staff finds it to be pretty solid looking deal. We kind of saw the beta version. I don't think it's available to us online yet, but expect it to be very shortly. The training was very good. Other than that, I don't have anything really to report. The flu bug has hit for families and a couple of us, but hasn't hit City Hall all that hard. So thankful for that.
Famous last words.
So is the mapping done now?
It's pretty much done. They had to go back and clean up this or that, so that hopefully it'll be online to us. As soon as it is, then we'll get our engineers involved, as we've talked about with respect to our stormwater deal.
yeah, it goes back to the discussion we had about the golf course and what lines might be there where we could hit the, from the water treatment building.
Oh, yeah.
And pipe in water,
Yeah.
wastewater.
Right now, we don't
Okay.
have our water and sewer lines in this map. We have our
Okay,
stormwater.
okay.
So-
Okay,
But that's, we're providing for that, and over the next few years, that stuff will be added. So
Okay.
we don't quite have all the goodies, but there's a lot on there now. And as far as city infrastructure, the storm sewer is all showing up.
because I know that's a discussion that we've had.
Yeah, if there's a way to get pipe water
Yep,
out.
be nice to follow up on that.
Yeah, you bet.
Commissioner comments?
I do have a few items tonight. I had a parent of a high school tennis player report to me that there's an awfully large crack in the southwest corner of the tennis courts, I guess near the tree. And it's not just a crack anymore. I guess maybe the root is, and it's a danger. I mean, players can trip over it. So maybe you can take a look at it before season starts and see what you can come up with, maybe.
City Park?
City Park Court.
Yes, sorry, yes, City Park Court, so, yeah, right, okay. I know this has come up before. I had a gentleman talk to me, and he was pretty excited. He says, why can't we put a sign up on Highway 81 that tells truckers that the left lane is a through lane through Concordia, so they will get over and get in that through traffic lane before they come over Jail Hill and, you know, have to do it right there in those last couple of blocks. And I remember talking about that a while back. Does KDOT have authority over those signs, or is that something that we can look at again, or does KDOT have to do a $10,000 survey to see that happens? Or
They kind of got the authority over there. I know me and Leland went out and looked at it, and we actually put a sign down on 9th Street versus down there on 7th Street to kind of warn them a little bit in advance. But when I called KDOT, they say, when you put that sign up there through, center lane through, then you direct everybody into that center lane, so you don't have the other lane, because everybody thinks it's just a turn lane. And it starts sooner. All you're doing is compounding your traffic into that lane sooner.
And I know if a trucker's ever been through Concordia, they're getting over.
Right.
But, you know, there are some that this is the first time through, and
I saw one at noon that saw
yeah.
a car in the center lane at 11th, and then they got over to the right one so that they could be the first one off. You're going to regret this in a while, too.
So, really, you don't think there's anything we can do? I mean, that's a KDOT decision, and,
Yeah.
okay,
they're
that's
pretty
how I'll
adamant
answer
about
that. That's fine, that's fine.
What if it wasn't a road sign? What if it was just a, hey, we're your friends in Concordia. We're looking out for you.
Yeah.
Truckers beware. If it,
Set it off of the state right.
Yeah.
okay.
Have to put it up on the hill. No, but that's, okay, that'll be my response. It's been now a couple, 3 months since there was a fire at a house on Peck Avenue, and if you've driven by it lately, they've just hauled furniture out of the house, and there's white, you know, or yellow tape around it that's starting to fall down. How long does it take for an insurance adjuster to get in and adjust that and get that cleaned up? Because it looks like a mess.
Yeah, I've gotten some calls from the neighborhood. We sent out a nuisance abatement notice today on
Oh,
it, actually.
good.
But, yeah, I drove up by there. I talked to the fire department people that are involved, and they said that there's still some, the insurance company still is wanting to look at that thing, and they're trying to do as little as possible until they get done with the insurance, so. I don't know how long it takes sometimes, but I guess if there's.
They could at least haul the furniture off that's outside.
Well, they're gonna at least can move it inside or something.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
get rid of that caution tape.
Yeah.
The caution tape can come down at any time, so it's
Okay.
not concerned
Oh.
as far as the fire department's concerned.
Yeah.
But
And Ron, are we, no doubt started patching holes also on Peck Avenue? I've heard it, you know, there are several holes along there that was reported to.
Yeah, they was patching on the east side of town, and they got some of them done over there. And they're running east and west on the west side of town right now, and then they'll be heading north and south, and they'll be getting them.
Okay.
I think they was up to about 11th Street today. So there's a lot of holes out there, and just right over here on State Street, there's quite a few too.
And by the way, this is the reason that Commissioner Parker isn't here. I mean, he lives on Peck Avenue, but that's, well, never mind.
He fell in a hole.
No,
You go tow him
that's
out.
that's not where I heard it, okay?
So if you want to take your time, Ron, yeah.
Yeah. And then finally, maybe it's about time the city puts some money where their mouth is. We declared our city an orphan train community. Isn't it time we maybe consider a statue in front of our front door at some point? If we have research some idle funds or something, I know we didn't budget for it, but, you know, I think maybe we should take a look at that and do our
The
part.
cost of the statues is running about $4,000 to $6,000, depending on what you do with it. And we have $24,000 in our Special Parks and Recreation Fund, which is state money, not local taxpayer money that comes in that we've used for playground equipment and that sort of thing, so we can take it out of there.
I could certainly get behind that.
I think it'd
I
be,
do too. I agree.
maybe Sheila could do some research and find a mayor of some small Midwest town that happened to be an orphan,
Or
you
maybe
know,
a
some
city
kind of
manager.
relationship. What?
I said, or maybe a city manager.
Yeah, there you go.
What about somebody that does the real work? Maybe a city clerk or
Yeah.
finance?
Yeah, there
I
you
think
go.
that, I would endorse
So-
that.
So, well, they're very good about trying to match the site with something pertinent to it, and we can ask her to get started, and she can come in one of these days and show us what they have. And I know, I was at a meeting on Monday, I go to a regular meeting concerning the orphan train and the orphan statue efforts and the branding effort, that they are now officially full for their second order. I think there are a total of 18 purchased
Okay.
now. So we could get one chosen and ordered and up this summer. If you want me to go ahead with it, I'll just tell her to. Sure. Okay?
That's it.
I had a question about, I just wanted an update about how we're doing with the water bills that are not being paid. Is that, have they regressed to the previous levels?
We have less that we're shutting off, we have more that we're turning over to collections, but I don't know how much. But when we turn someone over now, it's, $120 or $30 versus 70 or 80.
Half that.
But we've also raised our fees too.
Mhm.
But the
Right.
shut-offs are still down.
They were 25 to 30. Yeah.
So it's still like a
It's still
fourth
the
of
same
what we
people.
had
They just
prior.
leapfrog.
Okay.
But we've, for those individuals that missed or whatever payment, whatever happened to the payment, we've been able to minimize those. That I put it in there, I don't know what happened to it, other than the ones that maybe frequently we misplaced.
Yeah, the regular now seems to be looking better.
Okay, good.
Commissioner
Happy to
Sacco,
hear
any comments?
No, nothing.
I don't have anything. Staff comments?
Just letting you know, I'm trying to plan a meeting with the property owners for 18th Street sometime later this month, just to show them the plans and kind of tell them what we're doing and stuff like that. We'll let you know the date and time for sure.
All of them should be able to get their properties through the alleys, right? I mean,
I looked at it, and yes, they can, or some of them might have to take down a little piece of fence or something to pull in back there, but they should be able to.
yeah.
There may be one or two that they have to park on like Washington Street or Broadway and walk a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would think they would make that sacrifice for what they're gonna
Yeah.
get
You would think.
in a few months.
Yeah.
Right.
Just thought I'd let you know, I was gonna try and get them in the loop and let people know what to expect and stuff.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
good.
Sounds good.
I don't need to go over it too much, but I laid this sheet up there. I asked Thea for a little bit of a breakdown with the ambulance. I'd noticed in the minutes from several years ago, the clerk used to bring forward the ambulance collections, and in fact, the commission used to approve the write-offs, but we haven't done that for years and years. It got me to thinking about it because last week she did write off some money, and that's there at the top, $14,700. And that is the insurance write-off. It's the difference between what the insurance will pay and what we build. And obviously, you can't bill the patient after that. But you can see that 271 counts still open in 2 years and a month, and 180,000 still outstanding. She'll be turning those collection ones over before long, and more than likely, most of this patient one as well. We do have some people paying monthly payments of $20 to $50, but for the most part, if it's a patient account, a lot of times we don't see the money. So it looks to me like out of those accounts, what we started with, we've gotten maybe 30% of the money of what we billed. I didn't figure it exactly, but so that's kind of the way that usually runs. That's, I would say, probably maybe getting a little bit worse than it used to be for people paying. But as far as the insurance counts goes, you know, those pay excellent. But the collection ones were patient accounts too, and she does send several letters, several reminders to get them to pay. And we don't have too great a luck getting it through collections, although this time of year when people are doing their taxes, that's the best time to get them. So just thought to let you know about that. Look that over. Do you have any questions about it? I think it's pretty cut and dry.
Thanks, Stacy.
Feel like I spent a lot of money tonight. One night spending limit. So, there's one more thing that I wanted to maybe this spring or summer, we have a water main on 16th Street from Lincoln to Kansas that needs some attention. We've had a lot of main breaks over the last few years. Actually, 3 weeks ago we had another one under the street. So within the next few weeks I'll bring in you some numbers. We would do it as a crew. It would be a summer project as a crew. There's only 3 services on it, and it would probably take a month or so for us to do it, along with the other stuff that we do. So I'll be getting with Ken and getting some numbers put together so we can possibly knock that out this summer too.
They're at the car wash?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's been, since I've been here, 5. The main's out in the street, so I would have it engineered by Ken so we can move it to the south side of the street, and that has to be done. KDHE has to have engineering or something like that. If you move it, if you replace it in place, you don't have to have it engineered, but it'd be kind of silly to put it back under the street. So I'll be getting with him and then we'll have a study session about it or something.
That's good.
That's always been a problem, and the streets are kind of a problem there too. I mean,
Yeah,
just
a little
because of
bit.
that all
It's
the time.
probably
so.
because of us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry.
Mayor and Commissioners, the gray Dodge Charger we took out of service last year, we did get the driver's side airbag recall accomplished. And on Tuesday, Mr. Legas picked up the keys from me and I believe the title from Stacy. Didn't. Well, I told him where it is. He's supposed to put it on Golden Belt here pretty soon and get it auctioned off.
I saw it parked out there.
Just letting you know that the audit is scheduled for March 27th and 28th, and they'll want to talk to you, Mr. Mayor, sometime in there. I don't think it matters,
Mayor
but.
in Mexico, I'm not a good sign.
What were those dates again?
March 27th and 28th.
Be in town.
I'll be, maybe something that Mayor Pro Tem has to answer
No.
for, and maybe scheduling a vacation soon.
It's the
Okay.
week after spring break.
Yeah.
Oh, and if you're eager to know or care, the December should be final financial statements are online under the finance department, so those are pretty much they shouldn't change.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Any other staff comments? At this time, I believe we need to move into an executive session.
You can be very brief, but you have a 10-minute executive session to discuss non-elected personnel.
Inviting anyone other than yourself.
No.
I'd move to recess into executive session for 10 minutes for non-elected personnel, inviting Mr. Yuri.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay.
The orphan
Uh,
train.
No action was taken.
Word get out already?
Oh,
Well, I don't know. Should I thank the Orphan Train Museum or should I thank you, Lyle? I
don't know.
Were they waiting for your commissioner comment before bringing these in?
Courtesy of Surrey. And they
Oh, sure.
got those mugs that we sell down there, Concordia built them.
I'm not going to lie. When I came in to review the documents, I saw this on the counter. I thought, you need to go.
do we have to declare
Go
this
talk to them.
somewhere? I mean, like, as a, yeah, is it a bribe? I don't know. It looks pretty good.
Before your proclamation, maybe they should have.
At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Commissioner Sacco,
Second.
second by Commissioner Pounds. All those in,